Chosen one, listen carefully, so you did not arrive at this moment by chance, and you did not survive what you went through by accident. You are standing here because heaven allowed the test to run its full course, and you did not quit. You were watched when no one clapped. You were measured when no one defended you. And now, quietly but unmistakably, the verdict has been released in the spirit you passed. You felt it long before words could explain it. A strange calm after chaos, a stillness after years of pressure. The questions that once haunted you no longer scream the same way. That is not numbness, that is completion. The test was never about perfection. It was about obedience under pressure. It was about whether you would still choose integrity when shortcuts were available, whether you would still choose humility when pride could have protected your ego, whether you would still trust God when the timeline made no sense. You were tested in silence, tested in delay, tested when prayers seemed to echo back unanswered. And the hardest part, you were tested without knowing it was a test. That is how divine examinations work. If you knew the stakes, you might have performed. Instead, you revealed your true heart. There were moments you wanted to walk away, moments you questioned if God had forgotten your address, moments where bitterness tried to take root, where resentment knocked on the door of your spirit. But you didn't let it live there. You cried. Yes, you wrestled. Yes, but you did not rebel. And heaven noticed. This is the part many never understand. God does not promote noise. He promotes depth. He does not crown those who demand recognition. He crowns those who remain faithful without it. The reason the test felt endless is because it had layers. Each delay stripped something from you. Each disappointment refined your motives. Each betrayal exposed who you were not meant to carry into the next season. You thought the test was about endurance. It was about alignment. You thought it was about survival. It was about trust. Heaven was not asking, "Can you handle blessings?" Heaven was asking, "Can you handle authority without becoming what wounded you?" And now something has shifted. The atmosphere around you is different. What once drained you no longer has the same access. What once tempted you no longer controls you. This is not because the enemy stopped trying, it is because permission has changed. When God says a season is complete, certain doors close without explanation. Certain battles end without apology. Certain weights fall off without effort, as was spoken in the sacred writings of old, in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. That crown is not symbolic. It represents trust. It represents readiness. It represents heaven saying, you can be entrusted with more. Not more comfort, but more responsibility. Not more applause, but more impact. That crown is not placed on your head for display. It is placed on your spirit for discipline. It signals that heaven trusts your judgment, your restraint, and your ability to carry weight without becoming heavy. You are being entrusted with influence that must be stewarded, with insight that must be guarded, and with power that must remain submitted. With that crown comes accountability. You will feel conviction faster and correction sharper, not as punishment, but as proof of closeness. God corrects what he plans to use. The higher the assignment, the narrower the path. What once was optional will now be required, because your life is becoming a reference point for others. This is why you cannot go back. Not mentally, not emotionally, not spiritually. The version of you that survived the test cannot fit into the old environments anymore. If you try, it will feel suffocating. That discomfort is protection. Now hear this clearly, this rise does not start with fireworks. It starts with clarity. You will notice sharper discernment, faster convictions, quicker separation from what drains your spirit. That is the anointing settling in quietly. Authority often enters softly before it manifests loudly. If this message is confirming what you already felt in your spirit, do not scroll past it. Take a moment like this message, share it with someone who is still questioning their process, and subscribe so you stay connected to what is unfolding. This is not content. This is confirmation. You are not late. You are not behind. You were in training. And now the training phase has ended. At the very end of this moment, seal it with a prophetic act. Type 77 in the comments, not out of superstition, but as a declaration that you recognize the season of completion and divine alignment over your life. Your rise does not begin with noise. It begins with obedience. You were pushed to the edge for a reason, and it was never to destroy you. It was to reveal you to yourself. Pressure is a language God uses when whispers are no longer enough. When comfort would keep you asleep, He allows tension to wake you up. What felt like abandonment was actually divine focus. Everything unnecessary was being stripped away so you could finally see clearly who you are without the noise. Isolation was not punishment, it was preparation. When people stepped back, when support systems collapsed, when familiar voices went quiet, it was not because you were unworthy, it was because you were being recalibrated. God was teaching you to hear without echoes, to stand without leaning, to choose truth without consensus. Awakening cannot happen in constant distraction. So the edges closed in until your inner world became louder than the outer one. One of the first practical awakenings you were led into was stillness. Not forced silence, but intentional withdrawal. You began to notice that when you stopped reacting, clarity emerged. Thoughts that once tangled themselves began to line up. Emotions that once controlled you began to reveal their origin. This is not accidental. Stillness is where discernment sharpens. When the body slows, the spirit speaks. Learning to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it trains you to recognize truth without panic. Another awakening came through observation. You started to see patterns, your own and others, repeated cycles, familiar traps, recurring frustrations. God was not shaming you through these revelations. He was educating you. Awareness is mercy. Once you see a pattern, you are no longer a victim of it. This is why journaling thoughts, tracking emotional triggers, and reflecting on repeated outcomes quietly became important tools. Writing things down externalizes confusion and turns fog into form. You were also guided into restraint. Not every thought needed to be spoken. Not every reaction needed to be expressed. This was difficult, because silence can feel like weakness when you are misunderstood. But restraint is not suppression, it is mastery. Each time you chose not to explain yourself, not to defend prematurely, not to retaliate emotionally, you strengthened spiritual authority. Authority grows where impulse dies. Another practical shift was learning to ask better questions, not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is this teaching me?" That single internal adjustment transforms suffering into instruction. When you stopped demanding answers and started seeking wisdom, the pressure changed texture. The edge no longer felt sharp, it felt purposeful. You realized that awakening is not about receiving new information, but about seeing familiar truths from a higher position. Your routines were also quietly challenged. Sleep patterns, consumption habits, what you listened to, what you allowed into your mind. Awakening often begins with the body because the body is the gatekeeper of the soul. Fatigue clouds discernment. Constant stimulation numbs intuition. As you simplified, reduced, and removed excess, Your inner senses sharpened. You began to feel when something was off without needing proof. That is spiritual sensitivity returning. Emotionally, you were taught to sit with grief without letting it define you. Loss was acknowledged, not avoided. You let yourself mourn versions of life you expected but did not receive. This grieving was necessary. Unmourned loss becomes bitterness. Properly processed loss becomes wisdom. You did not rush healing. You honored it. And in doing so, your heart expanded instead of hardened. There was also a deeper awakening around obedience. You realized that obedience is not about control but alignment. Doing the right thing even when it cost you emotionally recalibrated your inner compass. Each small obedient act, walking away, letting go, telling the truth, choosing integrity retrained your nervous system to trust God over outcome. Peace began to follow obedience, not circumstances. According to what is revealed in the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. This guarding was not defensive isolation, it was conscious stewardship. You learned to protect your inner world because you finally understood its power. What you allow inside you eventually shapes what you release into the world. Awakening also required forgiveness, not as an emotional feeling, but as a decision to release debt. You stopped waiting for apologies that might never come. You released people from roles they were never meant to fill. Forgiveness did not excuse behavior, it freed your future. Each act of forgiveness reclaimed energy that had been trapped in resentment. Finally, you learned to trust timing, not passively but attentively. You stopped forcing doors and started watching for alignment. When something flowed, you moved. When it resisted, you paused. This rhythm restored peace. Awakening is not urgency, it is accuracy. You no longer needed to rush because you knew delay was no longer denial, it was precision. The edge you were pushed to was the threshold of awareness. You did not fall apart there, you woke up there, and now you carry a depth that cannot be taught, only lived through. Heaven watched every choice you made with a precision that goes beyond human understanding. Not just what you did, but why you did it. Not just the decisions that were visible, but the internal negotiations no one ever heard. You must understand this now. The most critical moments of your life did not happen in public, they happened in silence. When you thought nothing was at stake. You were tested in restraint, in moments where you had the right to react, the evidence to defend yourself, and the opportunity to expose others. You felt the surge rise in your chest. You felt the words form in your mind, and then you paused. That pause mattered. Heaven marks pauses. Silence, when chosen over reaction, is not absence. It is authority under construction. There were also choices that looked insignificant. Choosing to walk away instead of proving a point. Choosing to stay honest when dishonesty would have solved the problem faster. Choosing consistency when emotional expression would have felt more satisfying. These were not neutral decisions, they were weighted. Each one quietly shaped your spiritual capacity. You questioned yourself often. You wondered if you were being foolish, if you were letting people get away with too much, if obedience was costing you more than it should. That inner tension was part of the evaluation. Would you obey God even when obedience made you look wrong? Slow or overlooked, that question hovered over you longer than you realized. You were also tested in secrecy. How you behaved when no accountability was present. How you spoke about others when you were safe from consequence. How you handled temptation when no one would ever know. This is where many fall, not publicly, but privately. But you feared God more than exposure. That fear was not terror. It was reverence. There were nights you replayed conversations in your head, crafting responses you never sent. Days you imagined alternate outcomes if you had chosen differently. Yet even then, you returned to alignment. You corrected your heart. You released resentment before it fermented. You did not let bitterness become identity. God watched how you handled disappointment, not once, but repeatedly. Delayed answers, missed opportunities, silence where affirmation should have been. Each disappointment was a scale placed gently on your spirit. Would it crush you or would it refine you? You bent, but you did not break. That flexibility is strength. You were also tested in loyalty to truth, not to people. Loyalty to calling, not comfort. Loyalty to long-term purpose over short-term relief. There were moments you could have aligned with the crowd and avoided isolation. But you felt the warning in your spirit. And you listened. The ancient words recorded in the book of Romans, chapter 2, verse 16, still echo today. God will judge people's secrets through Jesus Christ. That judgment is not always condemnation. Sometimes it is confirmation. God judged your secrets and found alignment. He weighed your private life and saw integrity forming. He examined what you nurtured in isolation and saw readiness, not rebellion. This is why some doors did not open earlier. Exposure before formation would have damaged you. God was protecting you from platforms that would have amplified areas still under construction. Delay was mercy. Silence was safety. Hiddenness was preparation. Heaven also watched how you treated people who could no longer benefit you, whether you honored them without return, whether you stayed kind when advantage disappeared. That kind of consistency cannot be taught. It must be lived. You must let go of the idea that nothing was happening. Something profound was happening internally. You were being trained to carry authority without ego, influence without addiction to approval, and responsibility without control issues. These are rare traits. That is why the process was narrow. Now hear this clearly: the season of observation is closing. What was once evaluated will soon be activated. But activation requires acknowledgement. Not from the crowd, from you. So here is your moment to respond, not loudly, but truthfully. In the comments, write this simple declaration: my heart aligned. This phrase is not about achievement. It is about surrender. You are acknowledging that your heart came into agreement with God's process. Even when your emotions struggled, you are affirming that alignment, not speed, is what carried you through. When you write it, you are closing a chapter. You are signaling readiness, not perfection, but posture. Heaven responds to posture faster than performance. You were watched, you were weighed, and your heart did not drift. That is why what comes next will not break you. It will reveal you. The shift you feel is real, even if you cannot yet explain it with language. Something has changed in the atmosphere around you. What once required effort now happens with less resistance. What once felt heavy no longer presses on your chest the same way. This is not imagination, and it is not emotional fluctuation. This is transition. You are moving from testing into transfer. Spiritual shifts rarely announce themselves loudly. They begin subtly, almost quietly, because heaven values stability over spectacle. What you are sensing now is authority settling into place, not borrowed confidence, not forced boldness, but a grounded knowing. You no longer feel the need to convince people of who you are. You are becoming comfortable letting fruit speak later. Before this shift, you were constantly reacting to delays, reacting to opposition, reacting to misunderstanding. Now you are responding instead. That difference is everything. Reaction comes from pressure. Response comes from position. You are no longer fighting to be seen. You are learning how to stand. This is why some things stopped working the way they used to. Old strategies, old coping mechanisms, old relational dynamics. God intentionally disrupted them because they belong to a previous version of you. If they had continued, they would have limited the authority now forming in your life. When God upgrades your internal capacity, He must also remove external systems that no longer match it. You may notice that your discernment has sharpened. You see through conversations faster. You sense intentions more clearly. You feel warnings earlier. This is not suspicion, it is perception. Authority requires clarity, and clarity requires distance from emotional entanglement. God is teaching you how to observe without absorbing. The shift is also emotional. You still feel deeply, but you are no longer ruled by feelings. What once would have thrown you into anxiety now passes through you without settling. This does not mean you are indifferent. It means you are anchored. Anchors allow movement without drift. Do not underestimate this phase. Many people sabotage the shift because it does not feel dramatic enough. They expect fireworks, instant visibility, immediate results. But God is more interested in sustainability than speed. What He is building in you now is meant to last under pressure, not collapse under attention. You are also entering a season where alignment matters more than effort. You will find that when you move in step with God, things flow. When you rush ahead, resistance increases. This is not punishment, it is guidance. God is teaching you to move with Him, not for Him. As Jesus Himself declared in the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verse 19, "The Son can do nothing by Himself. He can do only what He sees His Father doing." This is the posture you are being invited into now. Not striving, not forcing, watching, discerning, and moving in rhythm with heaven. Authority grows strongest when it flows from obedience, not ambition. You may also notice that certain people no longer resonate with you. Conversations feel shallow. Values feel misaligned. This is not arrogance. This is separation by frequency. When God elevates your internal operating system, compatibility changes. You do not need to announce it. Distance will happen naturally. The shift also includes responsibility. You will be held to a higher internal standard. Conviction will come quicker. Correction will feel sharper. This is not because God is stricter with you. It is because He is closer. Proximity increases sensitivity. On what you once ignored, you will now feel immediately. At times, this may feel uncomfortable. Growth always stretches identity. But remember, discomfort is not danger. It is evidence that you are expanding beyond old limitations. Do not retreat just because things feel unfamiliar. Familiarity is not the same as safety. This is also a season of quiet confidence. You do not need to announce what God is doing. You do not need to explain your process to everyone. Some things mature best in privacy. Let the shift finish its work before you expose it to opinions. If this message resonates with what you are experiencing internally, take a moment gently and intentionally to support this space. Like this message so it can reach others who are sensing the same shift but lack language for it. Share it with someone who is in transition and needs reassurance. And if you have not yet subscribed, consider doing so, not out of obligation, but alignment so you stay connected as this journey unfolds. The shift you feel is not the destination. It is the recalibration before movement. God is adjusting your posture so you can carry what is coming without strain. He is teaching you how to walk in authority without noise, how to lead without force, how to rise without losing yourself. Trust this phase. Do not rush it. Do not downplay it. You are not becoming someone else. You are becoming more yourself, stripped of fear, refined by obedience, grounded in truth. The shift is real, and it is working in your favor. Something decisive is happening now, even if it feels quiet on the surface. Enemies are losing access to you not because they suddenly became weaker, but because permission has been revoked. There is a difference between fighting battles and being removed from them. You are not just winning conflicts anymore, you are being repositioned beyond their reach. In earlier seasons, everything felt like warfare. You had to pray just to stay steady. You had to guard your mind constantly. You had to recover from conversations, environments, and relationships that drained you. That level of intensity was necessary then, because you were still forming discernment. But now, discernment has matured into authority. Authority changes the rules of engagement. Instead of reacting to attacks, you begin to notice fewer attacks reaching you at all. Certain temptations no longer circle the same way. Certain manipulations no longer land. Certain voices that once influenced your emotions now sound distant, almost irrelevant. This is not coincidence. This is containment. God is closing access points you did not even realize were open. Emotional doors, relational permissions, thought patterns that once gave the enemy leverage. He is not just protecting you from external threats, he is sealing internal vulnerabilities. This is deeper than protection, it is fortification. You may notice that some people are suddenly uncomfortable around you. Not hostile, just uneasy. Your presence exposes motives without accusation. Your silence unsettles manipulation. Your boundaries confuse those who benefited from your lack of them. This is not because you changed your character. It is because you changed your posture. In past seasons, you explained yourself too much. You gave people access to your process, your emotions, your internal wrestling. Now, you feel no need to do that. Privacy has become natural, not defensive. You are learning that not everyone deserves a front row seat to what God is doing in you. This is also why certain doors are closing without drama. No big confrontation, no final argument, just distance, just silence, just a gentle but firm ending. God is doing this because what is coming next cannot be negotiated with distractions. It requires focus, it requires clarity, it requires clean access. Do not misinterpret this season as loneliness. It is insulation. God is reducing interference. He is limiting who can speak into your life, who can influence your decisions, who can pull on your emotions. This is what happens before elevation access narrows. You might feel moments of nostalgia, tempted to reopen doors God has clearly shut. Resist that urge. What drained you before will drain you again. What delayed you before will delay you again. Closure is not cruelty, it is wisdom. God is protecting you from cycles disguised as comfort. You are also being protected from unnecessary warfare. Some battles you thought you needed to fight are being handled without your involvement. God is defending you in rooms you will never enter, conversations you will never hear, plans formed against you that dissolve before execution. This is the reward of restraint. The Word of God declares in the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verse 17, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Notice the verse does not say weapons will not be formed. It says they will not prosper. Formation is allowed. Access is not. The enemy can observe, but he cannot interfere the way he once did. That is a line God himself draws. This is why your peace feels different now. It is not fragile. It is not dependent on circumstances. It remains even when things are unresolved. That kind of peace only comes when protection is active. when heaven is standing guard over your next steps. You are also learning discernment and invitation. Not every open door is yours to walk through. Not every opportunity is aligned. You are no longer impressed by speed or visibility. You are guided by peace. That shift alone disqualifies many traps that once looked appealing. As access is removed from enemies, access is also being refined among allies. God is filtering who can walk with you into the next season. Fewer people, deeper alignment, clearer communication. This is not loss, it is precision. There may be moments where you feel exposed without old defenses, but what you are actually experiencing is confidence without armor. You are no longer hiding behind coping mechanisms. You are standing in truth. That is why protection feels lighter. It is internal now. At the end of this section, seal what you are recognizing. In the comments, type this number 333. This number is not about superstition. It represents divine alignment, protection, and confirmation that unhealthy access has been removed from your life. You are not losing anything valuable. You are losing what could not go with you. And that is protection in its purest form. Your name is being called in the spirit, not audibly, not publicly, but unmistakably. This calling does not sound like noise, it feels like alignment. Things begin to fall into place without force. Conversations shift direction unexpectedly. Opportunities surface with timing that feels deliberate rather than rushed. This is not coincidence. This is response. Heaven responds when readiness replaces resistance. For a long time, you asked God for clarity, for confirmation, for direction. What you did not realize is that direction often waits for posture. God does not shout instructions over chaos. He waits until the inner environment is still enough to receive them. That stillness has been forming in you quietly, patiently, through obedience, restraint, and trust. When your name is called in the Spirit, it is not an invitation to visibility, it is an invitation to responsibility. Alignment always precedes assignment. You are not being summoned to impress, you are being summoned to serve with precision. The calling you are stepping into requires discernment more than charisma, faithfulness more than force. You may notice that you are thinking differently now. Your prayers have changed tone. They are less desperate, less rushed, more surrendered. You are no longer asking God to bless your plans as often as you are asking Him to reveal His. That shift alone signals maturity. Heaven responds quickly to surrendered hearts. There is also a new sensitivity forming in you. You sense when to speak and when to remain silent. You feel when to move and when to wait. This sensitivity is not hesitation, it is attunement. You are learning the language of timing, and timing more than talent determines impact. Do not be surprised if things that once excited you no longer hold your attention. Your appetite is changing. What used to feel meaningful now feels incomplete. This is because your spirit recognizes that you are being repositioned. God often removes desire for lesser things before He reveals greater ones. Detachment is preparation. At the same time, there may be a quiet urgency within you, not panic, but awareness. A sense that what you do next matters, that how you steward your days matters, that casual disobedience is no longer an option. This awareness is not pressure, it is clarity. When calling draws near, clarity sharpens. The Spirit spoke through the prophet Jeremiah in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 7. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Notice the order. God does not first describe the destination. He establishes obedience. He does not negotiate comfort. He confirms commission. This is what is happening now. You are being aligned to respond, not to question every step. Trust is being activated at a deeper level. You may feel moments of intimidation, not fear, but the weight of significance. You are becoming aware that your words carry influence, that your decisions affect others, that your example speaks even when you are silent. This weight is not meant to crush you. It is meant to steady you. There is also refinement happening in how you relate to people. You are less impressed by flattery and more attentive to fruit. You listen beyond words. You notice patterns. This discernment is necessary because where you are going, misalignment is costly. God is sharpening your perception to protect the mission. Do not rush this phase by trying to define everything too quickly. Calling unfolds in layers. You do not need the full picture to take the next step. You only need obedience for what is revealed now. Clarity follows movement, not the other way around. You may also experience moments of humility that feel almost uncomfortable. Recognition without pride. Opportunity without entitlement. This is intentional. God is anchoring you so that when expansion comes, you do not drift. Expansion without anchoring leads to collapse. There will be times when you feel unseen again, even after all you have endured. Do not misinterpret that as delay. Sometimes God hides what He is preparing to protect it from premature exposure. Hiddenness is not absence. It is incubation. You are also learning to carry peace into uncertainty. Answers may not come immediately, but anxiety no longer controls you. That is evidence of trust taking root. When trust is established, fear loses its voice. Understand this: when heaven calls your name, hell recalculates. Opposition may attempt to observe, but it cannot interfere the way it once did. Authority has boundaries, and you are stepping into a space where those boundaries are enforced. You are not stepping into this alone. Alignment brings provision, support, and confirmation at the right time. What you need will meet you when you need it, not before, not after. That timing is intentional. Remain grounded, remain teachable, remain obedient. You are not being rushed, you are being positioned. The calling is not distant. It is unfolding around you now, quietly, steadily, undeniably. Your name has been spoken, your posture has been recognized, and your next steps are being ordered. You are now standing where preparation meets purpose. This is not the end of a journey. It is the moment you are crowned for the next assignment. The crown is not made of gold or applause. It is formed from endurance, obedience, restraint, and trust. It rests not on your head, but on your character. And character is what determines how far authority can flow through you. This is why shortcuts were never offered to you. What you carry now could not be rushed without being damaged. Authority that flows without character eventually collapses under its own weight. But yours was shaped slowly, deliberately, through unseen decisions and quiet obedience. You were not prepared to impress crowds. You were prepared to withstand pressure when no one is clapping. Character is the only container strong enough to hold divine authority without leaking integrity. This is why God allowed you to be misunderstood, underestimated, and overlooked. Each moment stripped away dependence on validation and replaced it with inner stability. You learned how to stand when affirmation was absent, and that strength now becomes the foundation of your leadership. As this crown settles, it does not elevate your ego, it deepens your responsibility. You become more aware of your influence, more careful with your words, more intentional with your steps. Authority sharpens your awareness rather than dulling it. You begin to understand that leadership is not about how high you rise, but how grounded you remain while rising. You may have imagined this moment differently, perhaps louder, perhaps more celebrated. But God crowns quietly because what He entrusts you with now must be protected from pride, distraction, and unnecessary exposure. The weight you are about to carry is not for display, it is for impact. Leadership in the kingdom is not about being seen, it is about being sent. You are crowned because you learned to rule yourself before trying to influence others. You learned to say no when yes would have been easier. You learned to wait when rushing would have felt productive. You learned to obey when understanding was incomplete. These lessons built an internal throne where wisdom now sits. This assignment will stretch you, but it will not confuse you. You will recognize it by the peace that accompanies responsibility. Not ease peace, not comfort clarity. You will feel challenged, but not threatened, stretched, but not shaken. That is how you know this calling is aligned. Do not expect everyone to celebrate this rise. Some will not recognize the authority you carry because it does not look like what they expected. Others will sense the shift and quietly step back. Let them. This assignment is not crowd-approved. It is heaven-authorized. You are not crowned to dominate, but to steward, not to control, but to guide, not to impress, but to serve with excellence and truth. Your influence will come from consistency, not charisma, from integrity, not image, from obedience, not opinion. There will be moments when the responsibility feels heavy. In those moments, remember the same God who tested you also trusts you. He would not place this weight on you if He had not already strengthened you for it. Grace accompanies every assignment He gives. The ancient words recorded in the book of 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. Declare, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. This is not a statement of arrival. It is a posture of continuation. You are not finished, you are faithful. And faithfulness is what keeps the crown secure. As you step forward, remain anchored in humility. Authority grows best in those who remember where they were shaped. Never forget the silence that trained you, the waiting that refined you, the obedience that protected you. Those memories will keep your leadership clean. You will also begin to see fruit not immediately everywhere, but consistently over time. Lives impacted, environments shifted, conversations changed. Do not rush the harvest. Seeds planted in obedience grow at heaven's pace, not yours. If this message has walked with you through confirmation, take a quiet moment now. Support it in a way that feels right by liking it so it reaches those who are still questioning their process. By sharing it with someone standing at the edge of their own calling, and by subscribing if you feel aligned to continue this journey together. Not out of obligation, but resonance. Your rise is not about escaping difficulty. It is about carrying responsibility with grace. You are being sent into spaces that require light, clarity, and courage. And you are ready not because you feel fearless, but because you learned faithfulness. Stand tall, chosen one. The crown fits, and the assignment awaits. Before you leave this moment, pause not to decide what to do next, but to notice what stayed with you. Not every word was meant to be carried forward. Some were only meant to pass through. Others were meant to settle quietly, waiting for the right moment to rise again. If this message was useful to you, if it gave language to something you have been feeling but could not explain, you are free to share it. Not to convince anyone, not to prove anything, simply to pass along what helped you stand a little steadier. Sometimes sharing is not about broadcasting, it is about recognizing resonance. And if parts of this did not connect, that is also fine. You are not required to take everything. Keep only what touched you, what clarified you, what strengthened you. Let the rest fall away without pressure or guilt. Growth does not come from accumulation, but from discernment. You are allowed to move forward quietly. You are allowed to sit with this without conclusions. You are allowed to return to it later, when life shifts and meaning deepens. Nothing here demands urgency. Nothing here requires agreement. Only honesty with yourself. What matters most is not what you do with these words, but what they awaken in you as you continue your path.